It was a warm and calm Saturday morning, the kind of day when the world feels slow and peaceful. The sun had risen gently, throwing a soft golden light over the quiet suburban street. The neighborhood was the kind where people waved politely. Kids rode bikes in the afternoons, and lawns were always trimmed neatly. On this particular morning, David was in the kitchen, barefoot, humming to himself as he brewed fresh coffee. The smell filled the small house, warm and rich, wrapping around him like a blanket. He was in no hurry. Weekends were meant to be taken slow. Outside, on the front porch, Claire sat in a wooden chair, one leg tucked under the other, holding a steaming mug between her hands. She wore a simple light blue t-shirt and faded jeans, her hair loosely tied. Back, anyone looking at her would see just an ordinary woman enjoying the sunshine. But Claire was far from ordinary. Underneath that calm smile and quiet presence, she was an active CIA field agent, trained, experienced, and very dangerous when needed. Not that anyone in this neighborhood knew that. She was just David's wife, polite and friendly. But a little mysterious. The street was almost silent, except for the distant sound of birds and the occasional hum of a passing car. A few houses down, Mr. Thomas was watering his garden. Across the street, a dog barked twice, then stopped. It was an ordinary scene in an ordinary place, or so it seemed. From the kitchen, David glanced toward the porch, watching Claire sip her coffee. He loved mornings like this. She looked so at peace, her eyes half closed, enjoying the sun on her face. She had a way of making the world feel calm, even though he knew she had seen things most people couldn't imagine. Her life before settling, here if it could even be called settled, was full of missions, coded phone calls, late-night departures, and moments where danger was just a breath away. But she rarely spoke about it. The CIA didn't allow much talking, and Claire wasn't the type to share more than she had to. David turned back to the counter, preparing toast to go with the coffee. The butter knife scraped softly against the bread. He didn't notice the sound of an engine approaching outside, not at first. But on the porch, Claire did. Her ears were trained to notice small changes in the environment. The kind of skill you never lose after years of high-stakes work. A white SUV slowly rolled into the street, moving too slowly for someone just passing through. Claire's eyes narrowed slightly, though her expression didn't change much. She kept sipping her coffee as she watched. The vehicle stopped in front of their house, engine running quietly. Inside, she could see two men, one in the driver's seat, one in the passenger's. Both wore dark sunglasses and casual clothes. But over their shirts, they had matching black vests with bright yellow letters. HOA security. That was strange. Claire and David had lived here for 2 years, and she had never seen an HOA security vehicle. The Neighborhood Homeowners Association had a regular security company that patrolled in a small golf cart, not SUVs. And the real guards were older, friendly, and usually greeted people by name. These two men didn't fit that pattern. David still didn't know anything was wrong. He was humming again, tapping his foot, thinking only about breakfast. Claire, on the other hand, shifted slightly in her chair, setting her mug down on the porch railing. She wasn't tense tonight yet, but every muscle was ready if something went wrong. The SUV's doors opened. The driver stepped out first, tall and broad-shouldered, with short-cropped hair. The passenger followed, slimmer, but with quick, alert movements. They both wore black tactical boots that looked brand new. Claire's eyes flicked to their badges. They were small metal shields clipped to their vests, but even from a distance, she could tell they were fake. The edges were too shiny, the designs too simple. Plastic, she thought. The taller man spoke first, walking toward the porch with a practiced air of authority. "Ma'am," he said, his voice deep and slightly rough, "we're here on behalf of the Homeowners Association. There's been a violation reported at this address." Claire tilted her head, giving him a mild, polite smile. "A violation?" she repeated, her tone calm, as though she were genuinely curious. The slimmer man stepped up beside his partner, holding a small clipboard. "Yes, ma'am," he said quickly. "According to the HOA regulations, you're in breach of neighborhood codes. We're going to need you to come with us to the office for questioning." Claire didn't move. She studied them carefully, noting the way the slimmer one kept glancing toward the SUV in the street as if checking for witnesses. His hand twitched near his side, where she suspected a concealed weapon might be hidden under the vest. The taller one had a faint bulge under his left arm to another weapon. Most likely, inside, David finally noticed voices outside. He set down the butter knife and stepped toward the front door, wiping his hands on a towel. Through the screen, he saw the two men and instantly felt a wave of unease. "Is there a problem?" he asked from inside. The taller man didn't even look at him. "Sir, stay inside, please," he said sharply. "This is official HOA business." That was the moment David knew something wasn't right. The real HOA guys never told residents to stay inside. They certainly never tried to take people anywhere. Claire kept her eyes on the men. "I'll need to see some identification," she said softly, her tone polite but firm. The slimmer man pulled a laminated card from his pocket and held it up for barely 2 seconds before tucking it away again. It was too fast for anyone to read. That was another red flag. David's protective instincts flared. But before he could step outside, the taller man suddenly reached forward and grabbed Claire's arm, not roughly enough to cause injury, but enough to make it clear he intended to move her. "Ma'am, let's not make this difficult," he said. "We just need to get this sorted out at the office." David's voice rose. "Hey, don't touch her." The slimmer man moved to block the porch steps. Turning slightly toward David, "Sir, I'm asking you against stay inside or you could face charges. Charges for what's standing on his own porch." David's jaw tightened. This was no HOA visit. Claire, meanwhile, didn't resist too much. Not yet. Her training told her to gather as much information as possible before acting. She let the taller man guide her, one step down from the porch, her eyes never leaving his face. She could tell he was confident. Confident. That meant they believed they had control of the situation. Good. She could use that. From the corner of her eye, she saw the neighbor's curtains twitch. People were watching, but no one was coming out to help. It was normal. Most people didn't want to get involved in what looked like official business. The SUV's back door stood, open, waiting. Claire could see a plastic crate inside, a coil of rope, and something wrapped in a dark blanket. She filed every detail away in her mind. The taller man kept his voice low, almost friendly now. "Won't take long, ma'am. Just routine." Claire almost smiled. Routine for them, maybe? But for her, this was just the beginning. David's heart pounded as he stood at the front door, watching the scene unfold on the porch. The taller man had a firm grip on Claire's arm, and the slimmer one stood in front of the steps like a guard, making it clear he wasn't going to let David come out. Everything about the two strangers felt wrong. Their stiff movements, fake badges, the way they avoided answering questions directly. Claire didn't fight back, not yet. Her body language was loose, almost relaxed, but inside she was calculating. Every detail, their positions, their breathing. The way the taller man's grip tightened just slightly whenever she shifted her weight was being processed. Years of fieldwork had taught her that you learn more in those first few moments of fake compliance than you do in an all-out fight. David tried again, his voice firmer this time. "Who exactly are you, and what's this about?" The slimmer man's eyes flicked toward David, his expression hidden behind the dark sunglasses. "Sir, this is an HOA matter. You're not involved. Please step back." Not involved? David thought. How could he not be involved when they were dragging his wife off the porch? His jaw clenched, and he took a half step forward, but the slimmer man's hand shifted toward the inside of his vest where a weapon would be. That tiny movement was enough to make David stop. For a brief second, he thought about grabbing the baseball bat from the umbrella stand behind the door, but one wrong move could escalate things too fast. Claire sensed David's hesitation without even looking at him. She didn't want him to intervene, not yet. She needed more time. The taller man spoke again, his tone a little more impatient now. "Let's go, ma'am. We have procedures to follow. You can ask your questions at the office." Claire tilted, her head slightly, as if thinking it over. She let herself be guided another step, toward the SUV parked at the curb. She was close enough now to hear the low idle of the engine, to see the faint scuff marks on the side door, as if something heavy had been loaded in recently. The smell of gasoline and faint rubber filled the warm morning air. Her gaze flicked toward the passenger side mirror. The inside of the SUV was messy fast food cups, a folded map, and something metallic tucked between the seats. Not HOA equipment. Definitely not official. Behind her, David's voice rose again. "You can't just take her. I'm calling the police." The slimmer man didn't flinch. "Go ahead," he said flatly. "We're the police in this matter." That was almost laughable, Claire thought. Real law enforcement never said things like that. And these two weren't even good at pretending. But their fake authority might be enough to fool neighbors who didn't know better. The taller man's grip tightened slightly. Guiding her down the last porch step, Claire stumbled just enough to make it look accidental, forcing him to adjust. His stance, in that fraction of a second, she measured his strength, his balance, the position of his feet. If she needed to, she could break free in 2 moves. But she still wasn't ready. She glanced toward the house across the street. The curtains moved again. Someone was watching, maybe filming. That could be useful later. The slimmer man followed them toward the curb, glancing up and down the street like he was making sure no one else was approaching. His movements were quick, restless, nervous, maybe. That told Claire one important thing. He wasn't as experienced as the taller one. He was alert, but not calm. As they reached the SUV, the taller man opened the back door and gestured for her to get in. "It'll be easier if you cooperate," he said. Claire smiled faintly, her voice calm. "Easier for who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he gave her a gentle push toward the open door. From the porch, David shouted again, "You're making a huge mistake." The slimmer man turned slightly toward him, his voice sharp now. "Sir, I told you to stay inside." David's fists clenched at his sides. He wanted to rush down the steps, shove past the man, and pull Claire away. But Claire's posture told him something. "Don't move yet." Her shoulders were loose, her breathing steady, her eyes scanning. She wasn't panicking. If she wasn't panicking, he shouldn't either. The taller man reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a zip tie, the thick industrial kind used for quick restraints. That was the moment everything shifted for Claire. Fake cops or not, once they tried to restrain her, the rules changed, but she still didn't act yet. She let him hold the zip tie in one hand while keeping his other hand on her arm. Her mind raced through possible scenarios. If she took them both down here in the middle of the street, it would be quick and loud. But if there was a third person, inside the SUV or nearby, that could be dangerous. She needed confirmation. "Where exactly are we going?" she asked, her voice still calm. "To the HOA office," the taller man said automatically. His tone was too quick, too rehearsed. He'd said that line before. The slimmer man moved to the other side of the SUV, glancing into the back seat as if checking it was ready. Claire caught the movement and saw that the seatbelt in the middle was buckled, as if to hide something under it. The neighborhood seemed to grow quieter, kind of silence that happens when everyone is watching, but no one is speaking. The only sounds were the hum of the SUV's engine and the faint rustle of leaves in the warm breeze. David took another step forward. "I'm not letting you take her." The slimmer man moved to block him again. "Last warning, sir." David looked past him, locking eyes with Claire. She gave him the faintest shake of her head, barely a movement, but enough for him to understand. "Wait." The taller man tugged on her arm. "In the car. Now." Claire let herself lean slightly forward, just enough to make it seem like she was stepping toward the seat. But her mind was working in overdrive now. She could hear the faintest crackle of a radio coming from somewhere inside the SUV. The voice was muffled, but she caught a few words. 2 minutes. Secure her. I confirmed that there were more of them, probably close. That meant she had even less time. Her eyes flicked to the reflection in the SUV's window. The slimmer man had shifted his weight to his back leg, his right hand resting near his hip. The taller man was focused entirely on her, his grip firm but not expecting sudden resistance. They thought they had her. They didn't. She took a slow breath, her pulse steady. Not yet, she told herself. But very, very soon. The taller man was now holding the zip tie in one hand and keeping his grip tight on Claire's arm. The slimmer one stood just a few feet away, eyes shifting between David on the porch and the SUV door behind Claire. The air between them all felt heavy, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. Claire could feel the exact second the taller man decided he was going to force her into the vehicle. His grip shifted from guiding to controlling, his fingers digging into her skin just a little more. It was subtle, but to someone like Claire, it was as clear as a gunshot. They were done talking. She had already been patient longer than most. People could manage. She had collected enough details. 2 men here, at least one more on the radio. A likely concealed weapon under each of their vests. And an SUV that had been prepped to hold her, maybe even transport her somewhere isolated. Waiting any longer would only make it harder to control the situation. The taller man started to pull her toward the SUV's open door, his other hand reaching toward her wrist, ready to lock on the zip tie. That was his mistake. He had shifted his focus to the restraint, which meant his grip wasn't as strong as before. Claire's eyes hardened in an instant. She twisted her wrist sharply toward the weak point in his grip, the space between his thumb and forefinger, and yanked her arm free. At the same time, she stepped forward into his space, driving her elbow up and back into his ribs with a sharp, practiced motion. The sound that came out of him was half grunt, half gasp, the air knocked clean out of his lungs. Before he could recover, she pivoted on her heel and used the same momentum to hook her foot behind his ankle, sweeping his legs out from under him. His back hit the pavement with a dull thud, the zip tie skidding out of his hand. The slimmer man reacted instantly, reaching for his waistband, but Claire was already moving. She closed the distance between them in 2 long steps. As his hand found the grip of a pistol hidden under his vest, she grabbed his wrist with both hands, twisting it outward in a way that forced his body to turn with it. Pain shot through his arm. She could feel his muscles give under the pressure. And the gun came halfway out of its holster before she slammed his hand against the SUV's side, pinning it there. David's eyes were wide as he watched from the porch. He had seen Claire train before, seen her on the mat at the gym moving like lightning. But this was different. This was controlled, efficient violence. Every movement was exact, every strike a calculated choice. The taller man was still, on the ground, wheezing, trying to push himself up, but Claire wasn't giving him the chance. With the slimmer man still pinned against the SUV, she kicked backward with her heel, connecting sharply with the taller man's chest and sending him flat again. The slimmer man tried to twist free, but she shifted her grip on his wrist, forcing his arm up behind his back in a joint lock that made his knees buckle. He dropped to one side, his weapon still holstered but now completely useless. The neighborhood had gone silent except for the sounds of the struggle. Somewhere nearby, a door creaked open. A woman's voice whispered to someone inside, "Call the police." Claire didn't take her eyes off her attackers. Her voice was calm but cold as she spoke. Not to them, but to someone they couldn't see. "Package intercepted. 2 in custody. Need pickup." The words were crisp, professional, like she'd said them 100 times before. And she didn't need to shout. Her small comms device, hidden in her pocket, was already transmitting. To someone close by, the taller man groaned from the pavement, rolling to one side, but she stepped toward him without releasing the slimmer man's arm. She crouched just enough to meet his eyes. "Don't move." He glared at her, but he didn't try to get up again. Maybe it was the way she'd dropped him so fast. Maybe it was the knowledge that she wasn't alone. David finally stepped off the porch, his voice low but urgent. "Claire, are you okay?" Gave the faintest nod without looking at him. "I'm fine. Stay back for now." Her tone left no room for argument. The slimmer man was breathing hard now, his forehead pressed against the SUV's side. "Who the hell are you?" he muttered, his voice strained from the lock on his arm. Claire's grip tightened just enough to make him wince. "Not your concern," she said flatly. From the corner of her eye, she caught movement at the far end of the street. A black SUV had turned the corner, moving fast but controlled. Not the kind of speed you see from someone running late for a meeting. This was the kind of speed that came from professionals who knew exactly where they were going. The taller man must have seen it too, because a flicker of fear passed through his face. He looked at the slimmer man, then back at Claire. You're not just some housewife," he muttered. Claire's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "You finally figured that out." The black SUV rolled to a smooth stop behind the white one, its engine purring. The doors opened almost in unison, and 3 figures stepped out: 2 men, 1 woman, all in plain clothes, but with that unmistakable quiet confidence of people who had been in dangerous situations before. Their movements were precise, coordinated, and quick. "Got them?" the woman asked, striding toward Claire. "Both," Claire replied, finally releasing the slimmer man's arm and stepping back. One of the newcomers grabbed him immediately, snapping a pair of real steel handcuffs onto his wrists before he could even think about moving. The taller man on the ground tried to sit up again, but another agent was already there, pushing him onto his stomach and cuffing him. David let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. It was over almost as fast as it had started. The 2 fake officers were now in the custody of people who clearly knew exactly what they were doing. Claire finally turned to David, her expression softening for the first time. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded, still a little stunned. I think so. What the hell just happened?" She glanced at the 2 cuffed men being escorted to the black SUV. "They made a mistake," she said simply. The woman who had arrived with the backup gave Claire a quick nod. "We'll handle transport. You know the drill." Claire returned the nod, then picked up the zip tie from the ground and tossed it into the back of the white SUV like it was trash. She didn't even look at the 2 men again as the black SUV pulled away, taking the attackers with it. The neighbor's curtains slowly stopped twitching. A few people stepped outside, pretending they hadn't been watching. David could hear whispers starting up, questions being asked in low voices. But for him, there was only one question that mattered, and he'd save it for when they were alone. Claire walked back toward the porch, picking up her coffee mug from the railing like nothing had happened. She took a sip, still warm. Then she looked at David and gave him a small smile. "Let's finish breakfast," she said. The black SUV that had arrived slid into place behind the white one like it was part of a choreographed move. Its engine was quiet, steady, almost humming. The moment it stopped, the doors opened in perfect sequence, front and back at the same time. Out stepped 3 people who didn't need uniforms to show they were professionals. The first was a tall man in his late 30s, clean-shaven, his eyes scanning the area before his feet even hit the ground. The second, a woman with short brown hair and a sharp, focused gaze, moved toward Claire without hesitation. The third, a broad-shouldered man with a calm face, took up a position where he could watch both ends of the street at once. They didn't shout orders. They didn't look around nervously. They already owned the space the second they arrived. Claire stayed exactly where she was. The slimmer attacker still trapped in her joint lock, the taller one groaning on the pavement. The woman from the SUV walked up first, speaking in a low, even tone. "We've got you covered. You can release." Claire gave the slimmer man's arm one last controlled twist, just enough to make sure he'd remember the moment, then let go, and stepped back. Without missing a beat, the tall agent from the SUV moved in, catching the man's arm and snapping a pair of steel handcuffs around his wrists. The click of metal locking was sharp and final. The taller attacker on the ground tried to push himself up, but the broad-shouldered agent was already on him. He flipped the man onto his stomach with one efficient movement, pinning him down while cuffing him just as quickly. David stood frozen halfway between the porch and the steps, watching it. All happened like a scene from a movie. There was no wasted movement, no fumbling, no shouting. These people knew exactly what to do and exactly how long it would take. The woman agent glanced at Claire. "You're lucky they made their move while we were still nearby," she said, quietly, her voice carrying a note of dry humor. Claire smirked faintly. "Lucky for them, too. If you'd been farther away, they wouldn't be standing right now." The woman's lips twitched into the smallest smile before she turned her attention to the 2 men in custody. "You boys have a busy day ahead of you," she said flatly. as if they were nothing more than an inconvenience. The broad-shouldered agent began walking the taller man toward the black SUV, one hand gripping the chain between the cuffs. The man didn't resist. He wasn't stupid. He knew the fight was over. The slimmer one followed under the tall agent's control, his head slightly bowed. David finally found his voice. Who are they? He asked, nodding toward the attackers. The tall agent looked at Claire first, as if waiting for her to decide how much to say. They're part of a crew, Claire explained. Small but dangerous. They've been targeting families of federal employees, following them, testing them. Sometimes it's just intimidation. Sometimes it's worse. She paused, letting that sink in. I knew they'd eventually try something here. David blinked at her. You knew? You knew they might come after you and you didn't tell me? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes followed the agents as they secured the men inside. The black SUV. Only after the doors shut did she turn back to him. If I told you, you'd have been watching for them. That would have changed your behavior. And I needed them to believe we were a normal couple with no idea what was coming. David stared at her. So this was what? A setup? Claire's mouth curved into that faint, knowing smile he'd seen before, the one that meant she'd been playing a much longer game than anyone realized. I call it an opportunity, she said simply. The woman agent stepped back over. They're secured.
Ow.
We'll transport them to the safe site for processing. You want to ride with us? Or stay here? Claire glanced toward the house. I'll stay. I've got everything I need here, and my cover's cleaner if I don't disappear for hours. The tall agent gave a short nod. Understood. We'll debrief you later. The black SUV pulled away smoothly. No screeching tires. No dramatic engine rev, just a quiet, professional exit. It turned at the end of the street and was gone, leaving behind only the faint smell of exhaust in a street full of silent houses. For a long moment, David and Claire stood on the porch, looking at the spot where the SUV had been. The morning sun hadn't changed. The birds were still singing somewhere in the trees. And yet the air felt different, charged. Like the neighborhood had just seen something it wasn't ready to understand. Across the street, an elderly man stepped out of his front door, pretending to check his mailbox. Glanced at them briefly, then went back inside without a word. Out. Curtains shifted again in windows. People had seen everything, but no one was going to talk about it openly. David rubbed the back of his neck. So, this backup of yours? He said slowly. They were already in town. Claire took her coffee from the porch railing, sipping, like she was just picking up a normal conversation. They've been here all week, she said casually. Rotating shifts, staying close. Once I got the tip, these guys were circling. I put them in position. Got the tip, David repeated, shaking his head. From who? She gave him a look that told him the answer wasn't coming. Need to know basis. Gosh. David let out a low breath, half frustrated, half relieved. And I guess I didn't need to know. She shrugged slightly. You needed to look like you. Didn't know, that's how you stay safe. That's how we get results. He leaned against the porch post, studying her. Do you even realize how crazy this is? Two guys show up pretending to be HOA security, try to drag you off our porch, and you already had a whole team ready to grab them. Claire's eyes softened just enough to take the edge off her next words. David, this is my world. You think this morning was intense? For me, it was controlled, predictable, and that's exactly how I wanted it. He couldn't argue with that. Watching her handle the situation, it was obvious she'd been in far worse before. A warm breeze moved through the street, carrying the faint smell of cut grass from somewhere down the block. For a second, the neighborhood looked completely normal. Again, until you noticed the faint scuff marks on the pavement where the taller man had fallen, or the way the white SUV still sat abandoned at the curb. Claire glanced at it. They'll send someone to tow that soon, she said. Evidence. David looked at her, 100 questions still swirling in his head. But he knew from experience that she'd only answer the ones she thought were important. So instead, he asked the simplest thing. What now? She smiled faintly. We finished breakfast. And just like that, She turned, walked up the steps, and slipped back inside the house, as if she hadn't just dismantled two armed men and handed them over to a covert team. David followed slowly, glancing once more at the quiet street before. Closing the door behind him, inside, the smell of coffee still lingered. The toast he'd started earlier sat untouched on the counter, the butter beginning to melt into the bread. Claire picked it up, took a bite, and looked at him over the rim of her mug. "You're going to have to get used to this," she said lightly. David chuckled without humor. "I'm not sure anyone could get used to this. Give it time," she replied. From outside, the sound of another vehicle approached, this one smaller, official-looking. A real security patrol this time, probably sent to check on things after the noise. Claire didn't move to answer the door. Whoever it was, she knew they weren't here for her. Not anymore. The street was quiet again, almost too quiet, as if nothing had happened. But David knew better. Behind every window, someone had seen. Maybe they didn't understand what they'd witnessed. Maybe they'd tell themselves it was just a misunderstanding. But the truth had burned itself into his mind. 2 armed men had come to take his wife. They had no idea who she really was. And now they were gone. Inside the house, the scent of coffee still hung in the air. The toast he'd buttered earlier had gone cold, but Claire didn't seem to care. She was leaning against the counter, sipping slowly, the same way she had been before all of this started. It was almost surreal. The shift from danger to calm was something she carried in her bones. As if she could flip it on and off like a switch, David stood across from her, hands braced on the kitchen island. "So that's it? They're just gone." Claire's eyes lifted from her mug. "They're in custody. They won't be coming back." Her voice was so certain that it left no room for doubt. But David wasn't sure if that certainty came from the system she worked for, or from the fact that if they ever did try again, she'd deal with them herself before they got anywhere near the porch. He rubbed his jaw, trying to process it. "You've been living here, knowing people like that were looking for you?" Claire set her mug down gently. "I've been living here knowing I could handle it." He shook his head. "That's not the same thing." She smiled faintly, not mocking. "Just patient, David. You see risk. I see opportunity. They thought they could catch me off guard. They were wrong. Because they were wrong, we've got 2 less predators on the street." He wanted to argue, to tell her that normal people didn't set traps for armed criminals outside their own homes. But something in her tone, in the calm steel of her voice, made him stop. This wasn't recklessness. It was precision. From outside, he heard the sound of tires crunching over pavement. He glanced toward the window. A tow truck had arrived, bright orange lights flashing silently as it backed toward the white SUV the attackers had left behind. A man in a reflective vest stepped out, walked around the vehicle, and started hooking it up without even glancing at the house. It was like this was all just another job for him. Claire watched too, her eyes unreadable. "Evidence," she murmured. David frowned. Evidence of what exactly? That they were pretending to be HOA security? Or evidence of something bigger? She didn't answer right away. She kept watching the tow truck operator work, her gaze fixed on the SUV, as if she could see through the metal, straight into whatever secrets it held. Finally, she said, "Bigger, always bigger." The words hung in the air like a quiet warning. When the truck pulled away with the SUV, the street felt empty again. Claire turned back into the kitchen, picked up the cold toast, and took a slow bite. She didn't look rushed. She didn't look shaken. If anything, she looked more relaxed now than she had before the morning began. David leaned against the counter, his voice quieter now. "Claire, I need to know something. When you first saw that SUV pull up, when you saw them, what went through your head?" She swallowed the bite of toast and met his eyes. "I thought, finally, he repeated, almost disbelieving. They'd been circling for days. I'd seen them twice before, once parked at the edge of the grocery lot once. Driving slowly past the park, they weren't ready then. But today they thought they were." She gave a small shrug. "They gave me the opening I needed." David blew out a slow breath, somewhere between admiration and frustration. You're not like anyone else I know." "That's kind of the point," she replied softly. They both fell silent for a while. The only sound, the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Outside, life in the neighborhood was resuming, someone mowing a lawn to streets over. A delivery truck rumbling past, birds calling from the trees. It was as if the world was eager to erase what had just happened, but David couldn't. He kept replaying at the moment the taller man grabbed her arm, the flash of movement when she broke free, the way she moved like she already knew the ending. It was a kind of control he'd never seen before, not even in the movies. After a long pause, he asked, "So, what happens next? Are we supposed to just go back to normal?" Claire tilted her head slightly. "Normal's what people think they see. We'll give them that. But between you and me, nothing's normal." He managed a small smile at that. "I'm starting to believe you." She finished her coffee, rinsed the mug in the sink, and set it in the drying rack. Then she turned toward the living room, pausing just long enough to glance back at him. "Come on, let's sit. The rest of the morning's ours." They settled onto the couch, sunlight streaming through the curtains. By the outside, they looked like any other couple enjoying a quiet weekend morning. Inside, David's mind was still full of questions, but for now, he let them rest. She'd tell him what she wanted him to know, when she wanted him to know it. That was how it always was with Claire. For her, the morning wasn't about fear or relief, it was about closure. The threat that had been hanging over her for days was gone. The backup she had called in was already debriefing somewhere else, running the captured men through a system David would never see. She knew they wouldn't be back. She knew their network would feel the loss and think twice before making another move in her direction. And yet somewhere deep inside, she also knew this wasn't the end. People in her line of work didn't get endings. They got pauses, breathing space, time to prepare for the next thing, whatever that might be. David didn't have her training, her instincts, or her steel-hard calm. But he was learning one thing quickly. Life with Claire wasn't something you could plan for. You could only hold on and trust that whatever came, she would already be 10 steps ahead. Later, when the sun had climbed higher and the street outside was fully alive again, Claire stepped back onto the porch. She leaned against the railing, her eyes scanning casually left and right, as if just admiring the view. But David knew better. She was watching. Always watching. A couple walking their dog passed by. They waved politely, and Claire waved back with an easy smile. The man made a light comment about the weather, and she responded as if she'd been having the most ordinary morning in the world. When they moved on, David stepped out beside her. "You think anyone's going to ask what happened?" She shook her head. "They'll talk among themselves. They'll guess. But no one will come straight out and ask. People like to keep danger at arm's length, pretend it's not close." Looked at her, the morning light catching in her hair. But it was close. "It always is," she said softly. For a moment, they stood in silence. The breeze moved gently through the trees. Somewhere far off, a car door slammed. David reached for her hand, and for once, she didn't pull away or keep her guard up. She let him take it, let him feel the warmth and strength there, in the quiet of that late morning. One thing became clear to him. Whoever those men had been, whatever they'd wanted, they had underestimated her in every possible way. And in doing so, they'd given her exactly what she needed, a reminder that no matter how calm the surface looked, Claire's world was one where storms could form in seconds, and she was always ready to face them.